Zelos Podcast is sponsored by Kinetic IQ, where intelligence meets motion. Kinetic IQ brings a biomechanics lab into the palm of your hand, letting you measure movement anytime, anywhere, with just an iPad or an iPhone, and no wearables required. I've been using Kinetic IQ's markerless motion capture in my own practice, and whether you're screening athletes, analyzing posture and gait mechanics, optimizing performance, or guiding return to play, it helps practitioners like us save time, capture more objective data, and make instant actionable decisions. So to learn more about how Kinetic IQ is shaping the future of intelligent movement, visit them at kinetikiq.com. That's KINETIKIQ.com. You know, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have Metabolic Elite be one of the sponsors of the Zelos Podcast. You know what makes Metabolic Elite different is their commitment to real results. I've seen a lot of supplements and performance enhancement things over the years, but they pair clinical experience with innovation, like Lipitab, their proprietary solid-state liposomal delivery system. It's a chewable format which enhances absorption, like nutrients like BPC 157 and synapses. They're delivered more efficiently in the body, supporting recovery, focus, cognitive health. Their formulas go beyond the basics, solving performance health challenges at the system level. Every product is tested for quality, it's backed by research, and trusted by athletes and clinicians alike. So learn more at metabolicelite.co. And you can get 10% off all of Metabolic Elite products by entering the coupon code ZELOS, Z-E-L-O-S. This is the podcast that's all about the pros behind the pros in sports. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week on Zelos, we've got Scott Kuehn with the New York Jets. He's the assistant strength conditioning coach, and man, he has gone on a road trip through colleges and universities, learned a lot, and settled in to New York. So we're going to talk to him all about how he's gearing up for the preseason. But before we get underway, remember, at the end of this month, just in a few days, you still have time, especially if you're on the East Coast, to join me at the Fascia Performance and Rehab Summit. That's going to be March 27th and 28th in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. And we're going to have Bobby Stroop, Michelle Dalcour, myself, and Tom Myers with Anatomy Trains. He's kicking the whole thing off with a 4-hour workshop on day one. But this is 2 days of learning, getting deep information all about fascia, how it affects movement, athletic performance, and a rehab recovery program. Again, you can go to Perform Better or Parisi Speed School, or heck, my website, rockysnyder.com, for more information. And while you're on my website, check out the podcast archives, because we're coming up on 300 episodes now, over 5 or 6 years of podcasts, and we've got blogs on a weekly basis. I've got virtual consultations if you're interested in working with me. There's a whole bunch of things, including upcoming events too. And well, I guess the only thing I'll add to this is that I'd really like you to subscribe to the podcast and tell a couple of friends if you haven't already. And now on to the conversation. Scott, thanks for coming on the Zelos Podcast. I've got to say, the last New York Jets individual or professional that used to work on that team was the first female strength and conditioning coach in the NFL. Her name is Lee Brandon. And although at the time when the Jets hired her back in the 80s, they didn't have the internet to look up who Lee Brandon was, and they thought Lee was a man. Surprisingly, when she showed up to work, they're like, oh, okay. But she is legendary strength coach, and you're following in her footsteps. So first of all, welcome on to the Zelos Podcast.
Thank you for having me. And it sounds like no pressure. So hopefully I can her legacy.
Zero pressure. It's like, I want to get into it. But okay, you are with the Jets. Give us, to start off, I always like kind of hearing the superhero origin story. Like, how did you get to the Jets? Did you play football at an early age? You loved the weight room. You got into college, blah, blah, blah. How did you get here?
Yeah, so my infatuation with sport performance actually started in middle school. I was I grew earlier than everybody else in elementary school. Middle school happened. Everyone else caught up and surpassed me. And my parents they knew I was very heavy into athletics and I was playing a lot of sports at the time and, falling in love with football at that point, but still trying a lot of other sports as well. And, they saw that I was starting to lag behind a little bit. And so they wanted to help me, catch up physically. And so there was a private sector facility nearby that they started sending me to, and that facility ended up coming under new management, and the management was a little more slanted towards the football crew, and
Hmm.
so it just and the way they went at it and the system that they had, it was originally rooted in the old Frappier acceleration, which is now Athletic Republic protocols, and they adopted a lot of that and had a lot of the equipment and the tech around those programs. But they put their own spin on it as well, and it blew my mind away that there was a science to becoming a better athlete and to ultimately tapping into the human potential. And that just every time I went in, I was asking them questions and asking them for books to read and asking them to look at the study materials for I think they had like an accreditation through Athletic Republic at that time. I was combing through everything they gave me. So I was reading, translated chapters from Russian texts and portions of super training when I was in high school. That was my early exposure to training, and I felt very fortunate that I was put on a good path with the people that were coaching me there at the time as an athlete, but then also, becoming my first mentors in the field. And I settled into football in high school, and I did multiple sports my freshman year and decided I wanted to specialize in football after that. And so I dedicated myself year round to training for football, and then obviously playing football during the summer and fall. And that process just paid massive dividends for me. I watched my body transform, and I got bigger and faster and stronger, and I got better and better at football alongside that. And I did pretty well in high school, and I had the opportunity to walk on at Illinois State University. And
Nice.
yeah, and I was very fortunate that they had a great exercise science program that added the academic accreditation to my resume that was building at the time, if you will. And I always felt that it was just to be able to couple what I'm learning in academia with the applied experience of being an athlete was an incredible learning experience throughout my 4.5 years there. I took a redshirt year and stayed for a fifth year. And
So, sorry to interrupt, but wide receiver or corner? That's going to be What were you? What was your position?
wide receiver, and
Nailed
then
it.
road game kicker as well. So I had a had a slight specialty that I could kick, and I think I kicked off 2 or 3 times in my career, and caught 2 or 3 touchdowns as well. So maybe not too many people with that stat line, but I'm
Right
proud.
on.
Yeah, and I was under some great strength coaches at Illinois State, and they were my exposure to college strength and conditioning as I worked in for 10 years prior to where I'm at now. And I love sport performance, but I love the intangible aspects of college strength and conditioning in that you have everyone aligned and working towards a common goal, something bigger than themselves, and doing so in that team setting. And that was what further honed my vision for wanting to get into strength and conditioning in the collegiate realm at the time. And so that was what I aimed my sights on all throughout college. I was fortunate to have the experience of going from being a walk on to earning a scholarship. And my last year, we played for a national championship, and you learn a lot of valuable lessons going through an experience like that, and being a part of a team like that. And it does, add a little bit of oomph to your credibility when you're speaking with athletes and talking about your experiences and drawing from them to work with them. So I tried the combine pro day route. A lot of that was selfish for me in that I not only wanted the experience of going through that training process, knowing I would probably be taking athletes through it in my career at some point, but also just to definitively, open or shut that door on my chapter with playing football. And once that played out, I went and got a job as a head strength coach at a high school in my hometown and worked at that. And that was one of those very pure, experiences of you're working with a bunch of kids who most aren't going to play college football, but I was freshly off of a national championship and playing Division I football, so they hung on my every word, and I had a lot of margin for error with working with those high school kids, but it was such a great first experience to drop myself into and get the experience of working with. I think I had 200 football players across all four levels of football there that I was the sole strength coach for, and I got to just immediately drop myself in the deep end of running a strength and conditioning program.
God, I'm loving this story. This is fantastic. I honestly like a lot of the strength coaches, especially in the NFL, did not continue their football career to the extent that you did all the way through college. There was usually something that occurred with at least the previous guests I've had on that they found out relatively quick during their college career that they were not necessarily going to be making that next jump. So they
Mhm.
decided to, or an injury sidelined them, but they really loved the performance aspect of it, and that's what dug them in. But for you, man, to make it to a national championship, and then, I mean, I don't want to necessarily speed up this conversation because I'm thoroughly enjoying it, but I'm looking at your CV, your resume, and what I see is a hunger for knowledge and experience. Like, not only do you go and you become a head strength coach for a high school, but that seemed to like that was 2015 as I see it. So for the last 10 years, you have been acquiring knowledge on an exponential kind of path. Like University of Kentucky, I see. Then there was sports performance specialist with acceleration sports performance. The University of Tulsa, William and Mary, University of Arizona, LSU. I mean, dude, do you even have roots to put in the ground? You're moving all over the place. That's crazy. Obviously, you don't have a
Right.
girlfriend.
I do have a fiance.
Oh man,
Yeah,
she is as patient as you can believe. Wow. Oh,
yeah.
she just likes traveling.
She actually we knew each other previously, and then we reconnected when I was at LSU, and she moved down to Louisiana with me, which was she's actually from up here, so this was a bit of a godsend that we were able to take a job here after she moved down to Louisiana with me to kind of start our relationship off. So it all just worked out incredibly well from that regard. But yeah, this is my, I think, seventh state in 11 years now. So it was just all, the right opportunities coming up at the right time and representing the chance to advance my career and take those next steps in a manner that's all kind of built on itself in a very fortuitous and linear way. So I've been really lucky in that regard.
That is fantastic. Okay, give me give me a short kind of like at the dinner table when my kids were younger. We used to do we you go around the table and talk about our day. We'd discuss what was the best, the worst, something that made you chuckle or laugh or go, "What the heck was that all about?"
Mhm.
And then something you're looking forward to. I won't go. I won't just throw those all at you. But out of all the places that we just listed, these 11 states or 7 states in 11 years or whatever it was, like, where did you gain the most knowledge and experience? Like, where are the pinnacle highlights of this path that you've just been on the last 10 or 11 years?
I think it's best summarized by what each of the stops afforded me in terms of growth, and if I had to boil down the way that I grew in a couple of
Bring it.
sentences.
Tell me more.
When I went to Kentucky, that came unexpectedly while I was working at the high school, and it was actually because I went and saw Eric Korm, who I now work for at the Jets, speaking at the CVAP seminar out in Richmond, Virginia, that Jay DeMeo puts on. And I just happened to approach him and told him I loved the way that he thought and what they were doing at Kentucky, and I'd love to come be a part of it. And 2 weeks later, he gave me the chance to move down to Lexington, Kentucky, and I was off. But that one was really about the drop off of the Dunning-Kruger curve, where like you think things are going pretty well, and you lose sight of the fact that you're working with high schoolers who will adapt to pretty much anything that you throw at them. And then seeing it done at an SEC school at a very, very high level was like, oh, there's a lot more to this and a lot of, more complexity that can be brought into it to make the training even better. And so that was what I think really kickstarted my desire to keep learning and growing and entrench myself in the team strength and conditioning or collegiate strength and conditioning realm. Tulsa was about the opportunity to take that next step, get my master's degree, start working and seeing other ways of doing that job at a more scaled back level. So now I've seen what it looks like when you have unlimited resources. Now to be able to take some of what I learned and saw and apply it in a situation where you don't have the same athlete pool, the same technological resources. And now I was working with my own team. So I got the chance to work with some Olympic teams and learn how to apply programming and small pieces of sports science or monitoring to those teams. Then I went to William and Mary for my first full-time opportunity, and that was again with Eric Korm, who I worked for at Kentucky, and a guy named Kier Wenham Flatt, who is on the internet as rugby strength coach. And both of them are incredibly brilliant practitioners that pushed me to unbelievably high heights with what they expected for the way that we delivered our programs and the way that I operated as a sports scientist there.
Give
And
me an example if you don't mind. What do you mean they push you to higher heights? Yeah.
so the what was difficult about that situation was there was only four of us strength coaches for 23 teams and approximately 500 athletes. And yeah,
Oh, sorry. That's a cruel joke on you.
yeah, and I was responsible as the first assistant for football and then the lead performance coach for three or four additional teams at one point. And one of those teams, I was tasked with essentially implementing a full high performance model where I'm helping with practice design and managing the global workloads and monitoring the athletes' responses to those workloads and providing that feedback to the entire staff and finding ways to fluidly adjust and make sure that what we're doing from a global programming standpoint is working to the end of winning more games. And so just having that dropped in my lap to say, hey, you've got to be able to do this at a much higher level of service than what we're necessarily going to provide for other teams, because they wanted to be able to have sort of a proof of concept to bring to the wider athletic department and say, this is what this can, afford you in terms of benefit on performance and health outcomes to take on this approach. And so to be the one that was going from, into my first full-time job, and now I've got to start learning about all these other aspects of sport preparation, namely tactical periodization and global workload management, and how to put all these pieces together, was just I was left with nothing to do but rise to that opportunity that was given to me. And so it just, it threw me deep into work and learning from all the practitioners who have kind of laid the foundation in those spaces, and just advance myself as quickly as I could to get up to speed and be at the level that I felt was expected of me by Eric and Kier. And so I just think the high level of expectations and the relative lack of resources really forces you to establish first principles to work from and build systems that allow you to operate efficiently and not, be flying by the seat of your pants every single day, but to know exactly what you're stepping into. Because I could go from 3 football sessions in a row to a lacrosse training session to a soccer training session. And if you aren't systematic in the way that you go about writing those workouts and scripting them, you're going to overshoot or undershoot your time. You're going to miss something about an athlete that has an injury that warrants modification. So it really forced me to establish those first principles and start to think about how I build systems that allow for me to be my best self for each of those teams that I'm working with.
Scott, first of all, you are so well spoken. I'm wondering, were you like did you minor in communications, or maybe your parents or teachers or public speakers? You haven't said or ah one time. Your sentences flow. Like, I don't want to pump you up, man, but you've got great speaking skills. What's that all about?
Thank you. I've had a lot of opportunities to do podcasts like this, and I think when I've watched them back, they've all had that same reflection for me of I've got to be better about taking my time to think about what I'm saying and not fill pauses in my what I'm saying with or like or whatever it may be. So it's the repetition of doing this over the years. And I think that's anything. Hopefully you're looking back at programs you wrote a year ago and you're finding ways to shore that up. So similarly, if I'm presenting myself to others and trying to communicate information in a concise way, an efficient way, I'd rather make sure that I'm able to do that at a better capacity than I was previously. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a challenging exercise to pause instead of use those filler words. So you're
It
doing
is.
great. Oh my gosh. And then
Thank you.
you choose to hone every craft that you have at your disposal. It's not just strength conditioning, it's communicating information and your ideas, which of course are going to carry over to your athletes and the other stakeholders that you got to communicate to. So let's just take us from leaving LSU about a little over a year ago or so. This is coming up on your second year with the Jets. As the assistant strength conditioning coach there, what's that like? What's that like to leave? And, before we hit the record button, we were speaking kind of candidly off the record on the NIL. We don't have to get into that. But what is it like to go from college culture to the NFL for the aspiring strength coaches that are out there listening?
It's funny because I think one of the overlaps that was in particular starting to rear its head my last couple of years at LSU is, with the advent of social media platforms that provide a lot of quick hitting information and, Instagram, TikTok, that they're seeing the way people are training, and there can be a bit of that appeal to authority bias where it's an NFL player doing a particular drill with a certain trainer, so they think that's a drill or an exercise that they need to have incorporated into their program. So what you're spending more time doing in college, particularly of recent compared to when I was at Tulsa or William and Mary in the 2000 mid to late 2010s, is that they want to know why, and they want to understand what the advantages are of the program that you're having them do compared to what they see being done out on social media. So it really does force you to think through, why am I advocating for this to be the way that they're trained? And some of that travels upward to coaches as well. They're curious about the way that you're training them, and there have been, those conversations over the years to explain why certain training methodologies are being done with different coaches that I've worked with. And so it's a great mental exercise to go through as you're writing out the program of why am I doing this? What place does this have in this program for this athlete within this sport? And so when you sort of always have that mental model playing in the background as you're writing out programs and communicating with the athletes, that's something that I felt carried over from college to NFL, because of course they're going to be skeptical. They've been exposed to strength and conditioning now. They've seen it at their universities. They've seen it across maybe the previous organizations that they've been in, and they know that their bodies are their moneymaker. And so they want to be sure that what you're asking of them is appropriate and working to an end that maximizes their ability to perform to their best on Sundays. So you have to be able to be precise and efficient in terms of what you're trying to get out of them, and how you're explaining that to them as to why they need to be doing it. And the downside, or I guess the reality of being in the NFL, is that you have much less margin for error working with these athletes because they're a little bit older. The game they play is a lot more physically intensive. There's less of a runway with the off-season timeline into the season. There's just different constraints that you're playing with due to the annual structure. And so your ability to push on the right part of the toothpaste tube, if you will, to get toothpaste to come out, has to be very calculated. College is easy. Most of those guys, they've maybe been in a high school strength and conditioning program, but they've not had consistent access to food or a formalized year-round strength and conditioning program. So most of the time you see freshmen, they take off from a physical development standpoint because they just have that regimen and structure to their entire year. NFL, you've got a smaller time frame, and they're coming from a myriad of backgrounds from the off season. So the way that you train them has to be a lot more precise, and they've got a higher training age. So they're not going to respond the same to the type of program you can write with a college freshman. You have to do stuff that's more precise and reverent of their orthopedic limitations or their preferences for training. Some guys just they can back squat, but they don't like how it makes them feel. So you're opting for a Hatfield variation or unilateral variation instead. And so you have to have that ego down when it comes to working with these NFL players, because you're not there to tell them this is what we're doing. You're certainly there to provide structure and guidance, but you're not there to just, like you do in college, this is how we're going to lift. And with very few exceptions, this is the program you're doing. You've got to have that give and take and that willingness to work with them and be reverent to what they feel works best for them, while fitting that to the program at large, and making sure that they're not off just doing their own thing in its entirety, that they're still training with the team. They're just training with the team with respect to their personal limitations and preferences.
I hear that. I mean, obviously you got some bright-eyed young high schoolers coming into the college ranks, and they're just, starstruck to the extent of what's available for them. But then you've got some seasoned NFL veterans that now, the coaching changes might occur, and with that, the staffing may change. And so they're having to go through maybe a change in philosophy, a change in the coaching culture, and so on. Completely different situation with that. So at this time in the season, I could see this being a really opportune time for reflection, of looking back, of kind of taking an inventory and questioning, kind of shaking your own tree, like you were alluding to earlier, some of the approaches that we just not take for granted, but that we have glommed onto. We got to say, is this really, why are we doing it? Is this the most effective means? What do we need to change coming into this new season? Is that where you are right now with you and the rest of the stakeholders on the team?
Completely. Yeah, we fundamentally talked about the first year as being about discovery, and we're just trying to learn, who do we have, how will they respond to the way we want to train and prepare them, and who are they as athletes. And obviously the NFL has its cycle. We're going through it right now with free agency, that we're going to turn over the team. There's going to be guys that aren't here anymore. There's going to be new guys that are here. We're going to have a draft class. So the roster is not going to have, and this is again where some of the similarities start to overlap from college with the transfer portal, that you're not necessarily going to have the same roster year over year. You're always going to have to account for new athletes coming in that have a new set of backgrounds and circumstances and preferences and injury histories that you have to account for with how you train them. But we do have fundamental understandings of, what does practice look like? What did OSP phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 look like for us last year from a workload standpoint? How does what we need to do in this off-season cycle prepare us for what they're going to be asked to do in training camp? So we at least have some priors to work off of now that help us to be more in the ballpark of what we need to prescribe from a workload standpoint, both on the field and in the gym. And so it just, that's what we're revisiting right now and what we're working through. But it's certainly helpful to have the information and the insight of what we experienced last year. And we took sort of it's the Charlie Francis adage of it's better to be a lot undertrained than a little overtrained. And we were conservative last year because, at best you don't necessarily get everything done that you want done, but guys stay healthy and they stay available, which is the most important thing fundamentally. And if you overcook them, you're dealing with injuries, and now you're behind the eight ball. So we would have rather been a little more conservative last year and left them clamoring for more. And that's what we afford ourselves the flexibility on, is if we see that the program's going in a direction where they have a higher tolerance for more work, we will make those adjustments. We're not married to what we print out on the training card just because it's what we wrote and it's printed. We would rather adjust week to week based on what we see. So similarly, we have a stronger idea about where we can start this year from a total workload standpoint and how we want to improve the distribution of those stressors throughout the week. And we'll give the first go at it when the guys get here at the end of April, and we'll make adjustments from there. But at least we know fundamentally what it looks like and the direction that we want it to go over I guess it's 9 weeks for us this year, over the 9 weeks of the off season, and how that's going to serve to prepare them for exposures in training camp.
We're just going to take a quick pause from this conversation to acknowledge our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. The Zelos Podcast is sponsored by Kinetic IQ, where intelligence meets motion. Kinetic IQ brings a biomechanics lab into the palm of your hand, letting you measure movement anytime, anywhere with just an iPad or iPhone. No wearables required. I've been using Kinetic IQ in my own practice, and whether you're screening athletes, optimizing performance, or guiding return to play, it helps practitioners like us save time, capture more objective data, and make instant actionable decisions. So to learn more about how Kinetic IQ is shaping the future of intelligent movement, visit kinetikiq.com. That's KINETIKIQ.com. At the forefront of metabolic elite is Jim Lavelle, internationally recognized clinical pharmacist, a chief science officer at Lifetime, and the co-chair for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. He's got over 4 decades of experience and has guided Olympic athletes, professional teams, and leading health institutions. You know what makes Metabolic Elite different is their commitment to real results. Like Lipitab, their proprietary solid-state liposomal delivery system. It's a chewable format which enhances absorption like nutrients like BPC 157 and synapses. They're delivered more efficiently in the body, supporting recovery, focus, cognitive health. Their formulas go beyond the basics, solving performance health challenges at the system level. Every product is tested for quality, it's backed by research, it's trusted by athletes and clinicians alike. And you can get 10% off all of Metabolic Elite products by entering the coupon code ZELOS, ZELOS. You've got team sports scientists exclusively mining through the data while you're blending your experience and knowledge and feedback that's on the field and in the weight room with these scientists. But what does that interplay between the sports scientists and the strength coaches really look like? Give me an idea of the type of conversations, obviously without naming names or anything like that, but in a given day, what kind of information are you looking to get from those individuals, and what kind of information are they hoping to get from you?
Yeah, that's where I think my time at LSU was invaluable to me, from being in a dedicated sports science role. And that was still the only role that I've had where I was solely over sports science. And so it allowed me to really deepen my knowledge and understanding and application of sports science. But I was always a strength coach doing sports science. I wasn't a sports scientist. There's too many strong sports scientist practitioners out there who have the requisite technical skills to do that job in the manner that it needs to be done. But I was in a situation with who I was working with where I was afforded the opportunity to kind of make that my own and to do it from more of that background or that lens. And I think it served me well to deepen my understanding of what's important to pull out and how can this information be used practically to inform the training process and the elements of practice design that we're able to help the coaches put together. So I think that was one of my, from what they told me when I interviewed, that was one of my my highlights, was that I'm coming in with that background and can, sit in the intermediary between strength and conditioning and sports science and help bring in some of the different ways that I've either communicated information and made it make sense, or interpreted different data streams, to even we had ended up at first we were going to build a bespoke AMS system, but what we arrived at was that we were going to be paying for, we have the Teamwork suite of apps, and we were going to essentially be paying for part of their services anyway. So we just thought it would be prudent to offload some of the data reporting and visualization to AMS to free up our sports scientists to work on some higher level tasks that he's had. So I was fortunate that I had built a skill set building dashboards in AMS, as it's known, in my time at LSU. So I was able to pick that up for him and help us get off the ground with that while they focus on some of those higher level tasks, and then have been slowly able to upskill themselves on building in Teamworks AMS. So it's, I think, to ultimately understand that a lot of reporting and what you're trying to get out of sports science is about being able to drive intervention of some sort, becomes the informing point for how you design these reporting systems and dashboards and what have you. Because at the end of the day, we don't just want it to be you log in and it's, some cool charts and a lot of colors and it looks really nice, but then everyone just says, cool, the numbers
Yeah.
are there. We want it to be something that informs, if we're talking about workloads, okay, how did this workload compare to what the athlete's done in the last 7 days, the last 28 days? How does it compare to his teammates? How does this, look in the context of the workloads that he's been handling in different KPIs, acceleration, deceleration? How does this look compared to his normal movement signature, if you will, of how he practices and plays the game? And so that's where it becomes less about just trying to build as many different dashboards as you can and have as many numbers and charts on one web page as you can, and more about the precision with which you build and the way that you're able to highlight key action items and athletes that might be outliers to the rest of the group, because you're not worried about the guys that are on pace with normal. You want to make sure you don't have a missed guy that warrants intervention, somebody that's their workload is spiking significantly compared to everybody else because there was an injury at that position group, and so all of a sudden he started taking reps with the ones and his workload has gone off the charts. That's something you want to be aware of as soon as it happens. So just finding ways to make sure that we know what everybody's norms are, and people get familiar with a guy's given, workload numbers, the amount of distance he typically covers in practice, whatever it might be. But then we want to have really strong systems in place to make sure that we capture guys who are a significant outlier one way or the other, to then drive our interventions with those athletes.
So, in order to establish an outlier, you have to have kind of normative data in a way, right? You're going to be using VBT or force plates or a whole bunch of counter movement jumps, all these different means of assessing. Plus, you're looking at workload, but then there's the other elements of sleep cycles, their fueling, and not to mention the psychological values. If there's some kind of subjective assessments, how do you digitize that? How do you create evaluations or numbers to go there? And then you're creating almost like a profile characteristic of each individual athlete, and some are going to fall into the bell curve nicely. You feel like, okay, they're not overworked, they're not overtraining, there are no dips in these numbers, no spikes here or others. But then you're talking about the outliers. That stuff fascinates me. Those are the places that you're not looking, the dusty corners that nobody has been really paying attention to. And then suddenly that happens. You're like, well, where the heck did that come? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's where our sports scientist Alex has done a phenomenal job of, and he's been in a tough situation in that he came in the year before us, and so he was working for one strength staff and was getting up to speed, and he was retooling a legacy sports science system, if you will, in terms of how it was hard coded. Right as he was working through that, a new staff came in with a different approach and wanted to operate differently. And so then he spent a second year retooling this legacy system, and that's where we were able to offload some things. But he's done a phenomenal job of rolling with the punches of it and building it out in the image that we all have as a group, because we meet regularly as a staff, and we're sitting down with this information, and that's been the fun process of this first year in particular, is what questions pop up organically in those meetings when we're looking at this information together that end up driving and informing the way that future reporting is done. So it's been a process over the last year of we get information and we're looking at it, and questions are asked throughout the meeting of, well, is this decrement significant or not? Like, how does this compare to his historical data? And that's giving way to, well, what's our system or process for determining what's significant, and how much historical data do we want to look at? And so it's just been this ongoing iterative process where the questions that are getting asked and the KPIs and the metrics that we want to hang our hat on and understand and then have an opportunity to intervene on are what drive those reporting lines, and the way that information is presented. And so it's gotten to a point now where those reporting lines and the way that we do it are pretty well established, and there will be minor tinkering going forward, but they've started to replicate that reporting in AMS. So now that's an automated report that's off of their docket that now, again, they can go back and continue to work on the system rather than just working in the system and churning out a hard-coded report from R. They can have that pushed to AMS automatically so that we get the report. It's in line with what we've agreed upon as being significant to flag, and having those different color codes and conditional formats to tell us what's going on with an athlete's metric. And they can either continue to audit that system and iterate for us, or they can find another project to pick up with and continue to chip away at. So it's been a good, and this was the same thing I saw in my time at LSU, was getting through the first couple of years where you're iterating to improve your information flow and understanding of what needs to be done across, one training cycle to the next, and then over multiple months, and then over the entire year, and then over multiple years. You start to naturally iterate to reflect where you're at, and that more long-term process of improving your reporting lines and making sense of the information and how you want to be able to look at it across those different timelines. And so to be in that place where we're settled in terms of our cycle reporting, if you will. And now it's going to be about how do we want to be able to recall information from years past on guys, and see what their performance changes have been relative to what those guys did last year. But all that tinkering and iterating becomes less and less as you go, and you get into a position where now you're able to open up and you've got your reporting lines in place and your structures for that. And it really just allows you to continue to work on refining your system and finding new opportunities to add value to your preparation program.
Right on. So there's a natural, seemingly undulating wave of focus and creativity, and then we tend to ebb and becomes, I won't say stagnant, but then after that kind of plateauing, we start to have this desire to explore more or learn more. And I'm bringing that up because I'm wondering, it seems like you probably have indicators or markers within your own career that get flagged when you have been, I won't say plateauing in any way, but like where, okay, I've got this all down. I think I'm kind of like doing well, but I need more. I need to learn more. I need to experience more. Do you have something like that? Do you have like a journaling? Do you have a calendar? Do you have a look back? How do you professionally, personally improve upon your craft and be aware of it too?
Mm-hmm. I've got a massive Google Drive that I've kept all of my work from years past on, and there's stuff in there that I'm constantly going back to pull from because it has, it could be something as simple as there's an Excel formula in a sheet that I want to go rip out because I know exactly what it did for me and I want to apply it to what I'm working on now. There's old programs that I've pulled because there was something that I really liked that we did that I want to go revisit and either see the demonstration video or see the prescription for it. So the amount that I'm doing that and revisiting some of those programs and just reminding myself of the way that I accomplish different tasks from a programming standpoint or a sports science standpoint, you get that revisitation to see how you wrote that. And it's the same that a lot of us do who have that growth mindset about the profession, that you go back and you're like, why the hell did I write that way? And I think that's always the mark, is when you're looking back and, like you spoke to earlier, we're going through that now where we're looking at what we did and, we're happy with it, but we see the opportunities for improvement as we're looking at it. And we're constantly looking for that opportunity to improve upon what we delivered last year. And it's always reminding yourself that you were doing the best you could with the information that you had at that time, but that a good practitioner is going to learn from the results that particular program gets and try to shore it up to improve those results the next time around. So it's we don't have this profession down to a science where we know that the program that we deliver to a team of athletes is going to result in massive increases in speeds, power, and strength universally across the board. I think one of my programs with one of my teams at William and Mary, over the course of a year, I had athletes improve their trap bar deadlift 1 rep max anywhere from 150 pounds to 0 pounds. And until we've got it universally figured out how we can get the same improvements across the board for everybody at every single time, there's a ways to go in this profession. And that's the complexity of it. And that's what I love about it, is that the answers aren't linear. Sometimes, most of the time 2 + 2 is 4. Other times it's 5, other times it's 3, and sometimes it's red. And you're left to sit there and appraise, well, how did I get red on that, that program or that result? So that's the open-endedness of this profession is what I love. And so to be able to go back and always have the reminder of the ways I've done things previously, and I think what's reassuring is that the principles that I've rooted myself in are always present. Like even when I go back to, like, occasionally I've revisited the programs I wrote at the high school when I was a head strength coach, just because it's fun to see where I've come from that. And you see the principles there, the application just is more refined than it was when I was a first-time head strength coach fresh out of college. And that's a good marker for me to be able to see that growth and that progression. And I keep a journal of notes that I take from different webinars and conferences and stuff that I revisit constantly to just, I forget the exact adage, but you can read the same book at different points in your life, and it has vastly different applications because you're in a position where the knowledge and the understanding that you have at a later point in life gives way to seeing the same text that you read years ago in a completely different way. And I think to go back and revisit what I thought was, what I wrote down earlier in my career, and then I revisit it at a later time for a different reason, puts it in a totally different light. And again, I think it's interesting to see what I felt was important to write down at that point and how I applied it to now what I'm actually trying to pull out from notes that I was taking years ago. So there's just a number of, different litmus tests that remind me that I'm not in the same place that I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. And I think that's the fun of it, is that you learn a little bit about one facet of this profession, and the fractals of rabbit holes that it opens up start to become more and more apparent. And it's, to my knowledge, they're never ending. So there's no reason to ever stop learning in this field.
Sweet. Well said. Okay. With the time remaining, how about a few rapid fire questions? You up for that?
Let's do it.
Okay. One sports science metric you think is overrated?
Max velocity.
One metric you'd never coach without. I like stumping people. Good.
Good one. Um, and it's tough because in the ways that I've leveraged sports science over the years, different metrics have resonated with different practitioners or different coaches. So it becomes a bit of a moving target. But I guess some metric of chronic workload.
Okay. How about velocity-based training or traditional percentage-based lifting?
I think velocity based, just on the merit of the ability to auto regulate for where the
Cool.
athletes are on a given day.
Common mistake coaches make when interpreting data.
Either overfitting or cherry picking the data in a way to arrive at the conclusion they want from the data, not the conclusion that is statistically correct.
Nice. Okay, warm-ups. Most underrated opportunity in training or just necessary prep?
I've done several articles on this, and I have a template that I sell on my e-commerce site. So vastly underrated. And I'll expand on this because it's a little bit of my hill to die on. That I think Ryan Horn put together a great graphic where he looked at the opportunities to warm up in college basketball across the year, practices, games, training, and it amounted to something like 56 hours across the entire year. And when you see it like that and you think about the premium put on time with athletes, to not see that amount of time in something that is so consistent in the annual cycle as a microdosed developmental opportunity that serves as a segue into whatever it is that they're doing in the upcoming session, I think is leaving some opportunity on the table. So that's underrated.
One book or resource that changed how you view performance data.
I would say indirectly the governing dynamics of coaching, just because of the emphasis it placed on the global nature of sport and development. So maybe not necessarily explicit on X's and O's of how to interpret data, but the understanding of the bigger developmental picture, I think, was imperative to then inform how you look to utilize performance monitoring pieces within sport.
Right on. Two more. The hardest part of translating sports science to coaches on the field. Don't say it depends on the coach.
Depends on the coach. Helping them to arrive at the why should they care of that metric. So part of that is selecting appropriate metrics should truly care about. Like, I don't think they need to be worried about an athlete's RSI mod, but if we're talking about the significance of a workload spike in their high speed running, being able to get it across to them of why that's significant and what implication that has for that athlete potentially.
Well, in 5 years, what will strength conditioning departments be doing differently in the NFL?
I would probably say I need more time to understand the landscape of strength and conditioning in the NFL. I think I'm in an organization where the way we do it is, I think, very, very solid. And I don't know how many other organizations emulate that. And I don't know if I could necessarily guess that or feign to know what it is other people do and how they look at it. So,
well, that just means we're going to have you come back on at another time after you've done your research. Man, Scott, this has been a fabulous conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I get so much out of talking to colleagues in the professional realm and get a greater appreciation for the complexity of your role, but also the passion that you exhibit too is just exemplary. So, man, so you mentioned an e-commerce site. Let's do a little plug on that. How about that? Where can people get more information and materials that you publish or create?
yeah, so my social media channels are all Scott Kuehn 88. So SCOTTKUEHN 88, my college football number. And then my e-commerce site is Scott Kuehn Performance. I'm not as active on there anymore, but I do have a couple of things that I've previously sold that have done well and made their way to other websites in the world. So, there's a couple of things on there, and I think that's about it. I have a YouTube channel that has, I think, 500 demo videos that I filmed years back to help support some private training endeavors that I had. So there's some fun stuff on YouTube if you're looking for an exhaustive list of, I think, strength exercises, ballistic exercises, medicine ball throws, warm-up drills. So you can check all those out and contribute to hopefully monetizing that channel someday.
Oh, sweet. Well, if we can do that, the listening audience, I'm sure they'll help support that endeavor for sure. Man, honestly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time and your ability to share some really great insight and information.
I really appreciate being invited on. Thank you.
And just like that, we're at the end of the podcast. Scott and the New York Jets, I cannot say how grateful I am to have this conversation occur. Thank you so much. And remember, aside from following Scott and the Jets this season, be sure to check out what else is happening in that neighborhood at the end of this month in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. The Fascia Performance and Rehab Summit coming up. 2 days of learning, some incredible speakers, great medical professionals, Alliance Orthopedics, Perform Better, Fascia Training Academy, and of course Parisi Speed School, all sponsors of this event. You can go to any of their websites or mine to sign on up, and we hope to see you there. Now let's just hear from our amazing sponsors one more time and go out there and have a great week. Remember to check out metabolicelite.co. Check out all the products they have on their website. Synapsin Pro is something I've been using to help stay focused without having to over-caffeinate myself. It keeps me in the zone so I can just really hone in on the things I need to achieve without feeling like, man, I gotta reach for an energy drink every 5 minutes. Metabolicelite.co. And don't forget, Kinetic IQ. They've got markerless motion capture for morons like me. I can use their product with my iPhone or my iPad. I can look at posture analysis, movement analysis of any exercise, gait analysis. It gives me everything I could possibly want when tracking people's movements. So, check out kinetikiq.com.